Dear students, I am Ramya, Assistant JJ College of Arts and Science Autonomous. In this session, we are going to see about the Renaissance period from the paper The Social History of England. In this presentation, we are going to learn about what is meant by the term Renaissance, which suggests different things to different people, and then inventions and discoveries which helped the Renaissance movement, Renaissance in Italy, France and Spain, and then during this period about the Oxford scholars, and the beginning of a Renaissance in England, and then Renaissance period also meant as a period of translations for the Renaissance writers of England, and then influence of Renaissance on education, on science, again on religion, and then the impact of the same on art and architecture. Renaissance literally means rebirth. The word is usually used with reference to the revival of learning of classical literature between the 14th and the 16th century. But it was more than that. During this period, there developed a spirit of inquiry, a spirit of freedom of thought and action. Men were no longer willing to accept without question the teachings, the superstitions, and the customs of the past. There was tendency to develop a critical attitude towards medieval institutions. Social, political, and religious ideas were all revolutionized. In short, a great change was taking place in men's attitude towards themselves and the world. It was as though a new life had begun. In the words of Professor Jebb, the Renaissance is the largest sense of the term, is the process of transition in Europe from the medieval to modern order. The Renaissance was a profound period of European cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth following the Middle Ages. So it is actually described from the 14th century to the 17th century, bridging the gap between the Middle Ages and modern day civilization. The word Renaissance suggests different things to different people. To a student of social history, it means the breaking up of the regime of feudalism and chivalry and the birth of new social conditions. To the student of religious evolution, this word suggests the Reformation and Counter-Reformation. To the lover of art and literature, Renaissance means the recovery of the masterpiece of the ancient world and the revived knowledge of Greek and Latin. To a scientist, this word Renaissance implies maritime exploration and the founding of astronomy, anatomy, physiology, and modern medicine. As Walter Pater called, the Renaissance is a complex and many-sided movement. Let us see the developments and changes in this period. In this period, A spirit of freedom of thought and action had started. Changes in the men's attitude towards themselves and the world. A tendency to develop a critical attitude towards medieval institutions. Further, social, political, and religious ideas were all revolutionized. Let us see the inventions and discoveries emerged in this period. Rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art, the invention of the printing press, the Marinus compass, and then John Colet founded the first school in England, St. Paul's Grammar School, too founded in this period. The Latin grammar prepared by William Lely, the first headmaster of the school. And then the art of printing. The art of printing was introduced into Europe by John Gutenberg in 1454. The first Latin Bible was printed in 1455. It was printed at Mainz in Germany. The art of printing reached Italy in 1465. The art of printing reached Switzerland in 1467. The art of printing reached France in 1470. The art of printing reached further Austria and Netherlands in 1473. The same art of printing reached Spain in 1474. The first printing press in England was established in 1476 by William Caxton. It was established in Westminster. The Press of Oxford was set up in 1478. The press at St. Albans in 1479. The first printing press in London was set up in 1480. The books in English were printed for the first time in 1483. The immediate effect of that books became cheaper and more plentiful. In the Middle Ages, the production of books was a slow process because they had to be produced by a copyist of the monasteries, and naturally enough knowledge was confined to the four walls of monasteries. With the advent of printing press, knowledge could spread far and wide, which in turn fostered a questioning attitude. Renaissance begins. The Renaissance started in Florence, Italy, around the years 1352 to 1400. Dante, writer of the Divine Comedy, Petrarch, father of humanism, and Boccaccio prepared the ground. Art began to flourish and new thorns began to emerge. By 1396, the Greek language was taught in Italy by Chrysoloras from Constantinople. After the capture of Constantinople, the capital of Eastern Roman Empire, by the Turks in 1453, there was a regular migration of Greek scholars. Italians welcomed all the Greek exiles to their capitals and posed as patron of literature and art. The language, literature, and philosophy of Greece became the fashion and enthusiasm of the cultured classes in Italy. In the 1400s, the Medici family came into power in Florence and helped many artists. During 15th century, Renaissance ideas spread from Italy to France and then throughout Western and Northern Europe. The great Italian writer of the period was Machiavelli, who was the famous Italian diplomat for writing The Prince and the Discourses of Livy. In France, the effect of the Renaissance was seen in the lyric poetry of Ronsard, the vigorous prose of Francois Rabelais, and the scholarly essays of Montaigne. In Spain, Cervantes' Don Quixote was considered as the wonderful gift of the Renaissance to the literature of the world. In England, the Renaissance was indicated by Geoffrey Chaucer. The period of Renaissance was also an age of translation. Many works were translated into English by Virgil, Ovid, Cicero, and Demosthenes and Plutarch. The first part of Chapman's Homer appeared in 1598. Let's see the Renaissance in literature. Sir Thomas More have begun Renaissance in literature in England. His famous work was Utopia. Utopia is a Greek word meaning nowhere. It was written in Latin. It was first published in 1516. The English translation was published in 1551. Erasmus was one of the last European writers who wrote in Latin. His famous work was The Praise of Folly. Edmund Spenser is the representative poet of English Renaissance. He wrote the first great epic, Faerie Queene. John Milton, English poet, wrote the epic poem Paradise Lost. William Shakespeare was celebrated for his sonnets and romantic dramas. And then Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, published in 1651, and it named derived from the biblical Leviathan. Rene Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, famous for stating, I think, therefore I am. The Renaissance in science. Nicholas made first modern scientific argument for the concept of a heliocentric solar system. That is, he only introduced the concept of a heliocentric solar system. Kepler and Galileo revealed the solar system in its main features. Columbus discovered the continent of America in 1492. Vasco da Gama reached Calicut and the west coast of India through the Cape of Good Hope in 1498. Magellan set out on his exploration of the Pacific Ocean in 1519, and then in 1521 he reached the Philippines and got killed. The Renaissance in architecture. Classical revival spread over the whole of Europe. Roman and Greek styles with columns and round arches and domes replaced the medieval Gothic style with its pointed arches, soaring pinnacle and spires. St. Peter's Basilica in Rome is the greatest example of the new style. This style reached England in the 17th century. The works of Inigo Jones and Christopher Wren was the reconstruction of St. Paul's Cathedral in London after the Great Fire of 1666. Wren also built 52 other churches in the city. Now come to the Renaissance in art. The Mona Lisa by Da Vinci, The Last Supper, masterpiece done by Da Vinci, Statue of David, Michelangelo, The Birth of Venus, Sandro, The School of Athens, Raphael, The Creation of Adam, Michelangelo, The Sistine Chapel in Rome, Michelangelo, Venus and Adonis, Titian, and then Metamorphosis, Titian. The Renaissance in religion. There were two movements, the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. These two movements, the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, started in Germany. Martin Luther is the leader of the movement. He translated the Old and New Testaments into German. He questioned many of the practices of the church. A new form of Christianity was created. The people who protested against the supremacy of the Pope came to be known as Protestants. Actually, Reformation is the term used to refer to the great religious movement of the 16th century, having for its object the reform of the doctrines and practices of the Church of Rome and ending in the establishment of the various Reformed or Protestant churches of Central and Northwestern Europe. It was a revolt against Catholicism and explosion of forces which had been gathering for years together. I think this presentation will be very useful to you. Go through this.